Namaste and welcome to the launch of Hofstede Insights India Operations. My name is Divya Susan Barkey. I'm an associate partner with Hofstede Insights, and it is my absolute honor to be your host this hour. A few quick guidelines as we begin this session. You will all be on mute for the rest of this hour. Please feel free to use the chat function at the bottom right end of your screen to ask your questions, to express yourself. We have allocated some time at the end of the session to answer your questions, time allowing. At the top right corner of your screen, you see a function where you can adjust how your layout looks, how you see the speakers vis-a-vis the slides. In a few moments, we will begin the session, which we're just waiting for more participants to join in. In the meanwhile, here's a look at what we have in store for you. We have guests joining in today from different parts of the world. First of all, thank you very much for making your time available to grace us with your presence on this wonderful occasion. It is a very exciting moment for Hofstede Insights. As you can see, we have some great guest speakers lined up for you from all over the world who will share with us stories of how they've used culture to achieve business success. Before I introduce the speakers, though, here is welcoming you to witness a very ceremonial start of events in India, the lighting of the lamp. For our international guests, the lighting of the lamp is a very significant part of any event that we start in India. It is very symbolic. The light entering to remove darkness symbolizes knowledge entering to remove ignorance. The lamp is lit with oil and a wick, which represent human negative emotions and the human ego, which are both burned to create the fire of knowledge. The fire always burns upwards, helping us reach our highest human ideals. Hofstede Insights is in the business of removing cultural ignorance by making available data-driven cultural knowledge. All the way from our global headquarters in Helsinki, Finland, to the India headquarters in Bangalore, please join me in witnessing the lighting of the lamp.
Welcome to Helsinki, Finland. My name is Sram, Group CEO at Hofstede Insights, and it is a pleasure to welcome you to our corporate headquarters. If we look at the world we live in today, most of the world's most innovative and well-led organizations are led by Indians. A lot of organizations are supported and enabled in their business practices by organizations from India, and this is one of the main reasons for us to open our office in Bangalore.
Having witnessed the symbolic lighting of the lamp, let me introduce our first speaker of the day, Hofstede Insights Managing Director, Akhilesh Mandal. Akhilesh has 3 decades of business leadership experience in Indian and large multinational companies in multiple geographies. The last decade, he has been a consultant on the people side of business, building high-performance cultures, employer branding, and leadership coaching. In consulting, he brings with him a strong mix of people and business insights. Akhilesh, over to you.
Thank you so much, Divya. My name is Akhilesh Mandal, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of Hofstede Insights India and this particular launch operation. Being an ex-IBMer, it would not be not out of order for me to talk about Lou Gerstner when he came around to turn IBM around from being an extinct, some so-called excellent company. And here is Lou, and I quote, "Until I came to IBM, I would have told you that culture is one among many elements in any organization's makeup and success, along with vision, strategy, marketing, financials, and the like. I came to see in my time at IBM that culture is not just one aspect of the game, it is the game. In the end, an organization is nothing more than the collective capacity of its people to create value." And the key here is the collective. Much later, when I started researching about culture, triggered by a large customer of mine, I realized what Lou said has been said much earlier by the guru himself, Professor Kurt Hofstede, saying, "Culture is the collective programming of the mind which distinguishes the members of one group from another." And as I went along and did so much of my consulting in the last decade, the companies that I came close to, I figured most of the successes have come because of their alignment of culture with strategy. And in along that culture alignment with strategy, obviously the leadership behavior came in, because without change of leaders' behavior, one could not actually go about doing any meaningful change of culture. At Hofstede, that's what exactly we do. That's our core competence. And I'm happy to bring the expertise of global Hofstede insights to our Indian customers. So this is what we do. We have 3 different pillars, and a lot of this in detail, of course, would be spoken by Egbert Sram, the group CEO, but I'll just mention here that we talk about organization culture as one of our core pillars, which essentially is about aligning work practices to strategy. That's where the work practices meet the strategy alignment piece. Intercultural management, which is where we make a boundaryless team across geographies working seamlessly. And the last bit is the consumer culture, which is our emerging practice. This is where a marketer gets an answer as to why a product so successful, let's say in US, is not working well in Europe or India and vice versa. The emotional relationship consumer has because of a national culture idiosyncrasies with a product or a service. And how do we do this? We have, of course, a great amount of research going on with partnerships of governmental and other institutions. We have a data analytics and proven methodologies which actually brings the science of culture to the organizations. And most importantly, we have over 150 consultants over 60 countries. And that includes India, wherein we have a great team spread between Pune, Mumbai, and Bangalore, bringing with them great amount of expertise and experience both in culture transformation, change management, and intercultural competence building. Now, India as a country, obviously, that it has offers many avenues for culture intervention. In my belief, in our belief, wherever there is a growth, wherever there is an opportunity to align culture with strategy, if that's not done well, I think organizations are putting money on the table. But more importantly, in the changing landscape that we see in India, there are three specific areas where we see organizations could do a lot in terms of aligning the culture. There are multiple organizations in India, the homegrown ones, the large homegrown ones, who are actually competing with their global competitive players. Now, these are in FMCGs, these are in pharmaceuticals, some of these are even automobiles. Now, these guys, these organizations, if they need to be bridging their culture gap together with the MNCs because they are competing for the same talent that are available in India with the MNCs. The second segment where we find culture intervention could be of great help are the ones where we find large multinationals entering India, piggybacking on not so small Indian companies to get a pie of the market share of India. And you know, the names that I have in mind. And the third one, and particularly so because of the fact that a lot of us are located in Bangalore, are the startups. Now, as of February 2020, India has about 20,000 startups. Not all of these are going to be staying for the growth phase, but even a fraction of this in the growth phase would require a tremendous amount of cultural identity for their sustenance going forward. So there you have an Indian organization, a face of Indian organizations of a global organization which is available today to you, and we are at your service for all of these and more out of India with the support of a global workforce that we have across 50-odd countries. Now, lastly, what I'm going to do is I thank you again and leave you with this thought of the Guru himself, which says the survival of mankind will to a large extent depend on the ability of people who think differently to act together. Nothing could be more true than what it is today. Thank you so much once again.
Thanks very much, Akhilesh. What a timely quote. I have now the honor of introducing our keynote speaker and chief guest for today, Mr. Bhaskar Pramanik. Mr. Pramanik is currently an independent director and advisory board member at various companies in India with a strong interest in culture and strategy. He is also the former chairman of Microsoft India. Mr. Pramanik, welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction. So first of all, let me thank Hofstede for inviting me to be the keynote speaker for the inauguration of your India office. I wish you all success in one of the most dynamic markets in the world. And I look forward to actually learning and knowing more about your organization and the work you do to help companies and organizations be successful. You know, I've always believed in the power of culture to shape corporate excellence, and have seen its impact in many organizations that I have worked for, including Microsoft. Most of my work experience over the last 40 years has been with multinational technology companies like Digital Equipment Corporation, Sun Microsystems, Oracle, Microsoft. And I've also worked for Indian companies like the DCM, a big, large conglomerate in north of India, and also with the Tata Group. Culture was and is important for both traditional Indian companies as well as the multinational corporations. So if you're working for a multinational corporation based out of India, you do need to align with the global purpose, the vision, the values, and the culture. But at the same time, you can add an Indian touch, Indian values to enhance its impact for Indian stakeholders and customers. And similarly, Indian companies going global need to adapt their cultures and values to suit a global workforce. I've been reflecting over my career over the last 40 years, and one thing which strikes me is that if you look at the goal of any organization, it is to strive to pursue and sustain excellence. I think that's the purpose, or that's really the goal of any organization. And they do this by two methods. One is by collaborative engagement, by focusing on purpose, vision, values, culture, leadership behaviors. And the second is through disciplined execution, which is typically defined by the mission, strategy, strategic priorities, targets and milestones, brand promise. These are the actions which actually propel a company forward. So it's collaborative engagement and it's disciplined execution. And to me, collaborative engagement is really what culture is all about. It encompasses all of these things, the values, the culture, the leadership, the purpose, the vision of an organization. And what is clear is that the strategies we choose are as important as how we achieve our corporate goals and objectives. And culture, consciously or unconsciously, determines the choices of strategy that an organization makes. I mean, that's basically, what I have learned, that it's culture which impacts your choices of strategy. And strategy is really all about the choices which you make. So what is culture to me? Culture is all that invisible stuff that glues organizations together. It includes things like norms of purpose, values, approach, that stuff that is really hard to codify, it's very hard to evaluate, and it's certainly hard to measure and therefore manage. And therefore, I'm very excited when I hear about the Hofstede principles and the fact that you use analytics, because to me, culture was always an art. And now I'm understanding that you've actually made it into a science. In a sense, culture is the DNA of an organization. It is the set of habits that allows a group of people to cooperate by assumption rather than by negotiation. And that to me was the killer. That for example, in Sun Microsystems, we had a culture where we could take the average and make them, superlative in terms of the performance. Based on that definition, culture is not what we say, but what we do without asking. And a healthy culture allows us to produce something with each other, not in spite of each other. That is how a group of individuals generates something much bigger than the sum of the individuals involved. Culture also enables or obstructs the velocity of a function. By where an organization is limiting its velocity, you can accelerate the engine that fuels innovation and growth and ultimately financial numbers. So that has been my sort of way of looking, where do I find, what is the outcomes we are looking for, where are there obstructions, and what role does culture play? It's not just about strategy, it's not just about action, but is there something missing in the culture which prevents that from happening? A lot of my understanding of culture has been based on my experiences and the outcomes from the initiatives that I've started in the companies that I work for. But really what convinced me was my experience and learnings at Microsoft as I got a chance to see the before and after of the cultural changes that Satya Nadella brought about. And I thought that I would share some of that experiences with you. When I joined Microsoft in 2011, Microsoft was still a very profitable and a cash cow. However, revenues were stagnant and most analysts and customers labeled us as a has-been. It was a very internally focused company. If customers did not like the products, then it was the customer's fault. Innovation was imitating our competitors. There were many fiefdoms, each fiercely protecting its turf. Engineering divisions were very siloed and not very collaborative with each other. Microsoft was actually a veritable sales engine. Very disciplined execution. It ensured that it didn't matter what products we were selling, the result and outcome was always market share. So if you put washing machines at the one end of the pipe, you would have actually got market share at the other end. I mean, it was such a great sales and marketing engine. But we were getting market share in a shrinking market. Microsoft also hired the best and paid well. There were many smart people in the organization, but the smartest spent more time trying to prove how smart they were, and rather than adding value. It was a know-it-all culture. Mistakes and failures were not tolerated. You got replaced or you moved on. The mission of the company was a PC in every home, and by 2010, there were nearly 1.5 billion PCs in the world. So in a sense, the mission had been achieved. Growth was determined by how much revenue you could get from other Microsoft products per socket. Every PC was like a socket, and therefore what additional revenues could you get out of that initial sale? Salespeople pushed licenses that customers could not use or needed. Anti-piracy was used to generate or force sales to customers. One of the values of the company, which was from Bill Gates' time, was about being self-critical. The founders had wanted people to be self-critical so that they would learn from their mistakes and continuously improve the products and processes. But instead, people used it to be critical of others. It became a reason to finger point and divert blame to others. I used to walk into meetings and people would say, in the spirit of being self-critical, this is what you guys are not doing. So it was not being self-critical, it was just being critical. So when Satya Nadella became the CEO, he quickly realized that he had to change many things, the purpose of the company, the strategy, and the culture. And he first changed the purpose from a PC in every home to empowering every individual and every organization on the planet to do more. He re-articulated the strategy around 3 platforms based on the cloud, personal computing, and productivity. But where he spent the maximum effort was with the help of the leadership team to change the culture of a 40-year-old organization. The key elements of the culture were adopting a growth mindset, becoming customer obsessed, adopting diversity, and truly becoming one Microsoft. He also redefined the role of leaders as providing clarity, generating energy, and making others successful. It was this focus on the culture and leadership behaviors that enabled the successful execution of the strategy, and in less than 2 years, making Microsoft a technology leader again. Today, Microsoft is the second largest company by market capitalization in the world. So that was my experience in Microsoft, and everything I've learned in the previous 40 to 50 years, I saw it in play. Think of it as a controlled laboratory experiment, before and after. And that's the learning which I thought I would share with you. So I am so excited to get to know more about your company. And I was really impressed to hear from Akhilesh how your company has built a practice aligning organization culture and working practices with organizations' strategic goals and objectives. And that you have models, that you have data analytics methodologies to bring science into the realm of what is considered invisible, touchy-feely, and unmeasurable. I actually look forward to learning more about your organization and its practices. Welcome to India.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pramanik, for that very inspiring message. And thank you for sharing your experience with Microsoft. I'm sure all of us are quite enriched by what you've shared. Thank you very much indeed. Bringing science into what is an art, that's what we at Hofstede Insights do. Our next speaker is a member of the Executive Advisory Board at AmCham, Finland, and the chairman of the International Chapter of the Finnish HR Federation. He also happens to be the group CEO of Hofstede Insights since 2012. Here to talk about the culture factor and its impact on leading organizations in times of disruption is our group CEO, Sram.
Thank you so much, Divya, for the introduction and also for all the other speakers thus far and still coming. To the team enabling us to be here present today, not in person, unfortunately, but virtually, and to all the members of the audience, thank you for making the time available in this happy moment of launching our Hofstede Insights India office. So in terms of today's environment and the title of what I'm going to share with you in the coming few minutes. Obviously, we have been talking a lot about disruption already for quite some time. If I go back a decade, we were talking about the VUCA era, vulnerabilities, uncertainties, complexities, and ambiguities. And if there's something that COVID has brought us, then it's definitely that. So I'll share a little bit more about a recent research that we did and what are lessons that we can learn from the outcome of that research. But before doing that, to expand a little bit on what Akhilesh mentioned when introducing Hofstede Insights, I'd say the title in this slide captures in an essence what we do. We make emotions and practices tangible. Because we all have our own emotions. We all work and share certain practices and others that we don't share. The question is really, when do practices lead and emotions follow? And when do emotions lead and practices follow? And in an essence, what we basically do using 3 different behavioral models is that in every circumstance, every situation, we start with the analytical approach to really understand, are we talking emotional differences? Are we talking practical differences? And then together with our clients, always together, embark on a journey to transform the way of working from 2 perspectives. Perspective number 1, how we work should support the execution of our strategy. Perspective number 2, and be emotional, sustainable. Why is that important? Well, we can all work against our values. That is really not that difficult. Pay people enough, give them enough learning, give them enough status. The question is it sustainable? And that sustainability becomes very important, both from a mental health perspective, also from a diversity and inclusion perspective, and definitely in times of disruption when you want to count on the people around you. And for that, the emotions and the practices need to be aligned. Over the last 35 years, we have built Hofstede Insights in such an organization that together with our clients, we take that step-by-step, data-driven approach on a topic that otherwise risks being too emotionally driven and lacking the common sense. And as we all know, the common sense is the least common of the senses. If we talk about VUCA and we talk about COVID has brought to light that things like digitalization can actually happen surprisingly fast. Because who would have predicted a year ago that pretty much all of us nowadays, if we're lucky enough, can work from home? We don't need to travel anymore. Although most of us will probably still like to travel, the fact that digital environment has come to that state that we can work wherever we want, all of a sudden has become a reality for most of us. Yet, it doesn't take away some of the stress and some of the uncertainties that remain. Is this to stay? Is it to change? How is it going to impact our future way of working? And this is why in the spring of this year, we basically started a journey to asking executives from a total of 27 different organizations from across the globe on their opinion on how has COVID transformed your organizational culture. Now, the full report will be shared with our audience in January, February 2021, but already today I'll share some initial findings with you. The research that we did basically touched upon a very wide range of industrial services industry, manufacturing, STEM topics, etc. And the company sizes were pretty much predominantly larger organizations, 500 upward. And yes, from a European, especially Finnish perspective, this is a large organization. That's one of those things that in India, a small startup has a few hundred people. In Finland, that's like a big company. So we also have very different perspectives on what numbers mean, but these numbers basically mean it is a very good representative sample of the industry. Majority of our respondents were female. Majority also had senior management positions and therefore was on the older side of the age range. And basically what we did was we did a semiotic analysis, a language analysis from how they described the organizational development inside their organization. So it was not just another survey, it was actually a fairly advanced technique, which we call the Organizational Culture Practices Dictionary, where we dissect and analyze language use. Now, a lot of data in this slide. So basically what it means and what I'll highlight for today's purpose specifically is that what we have seen as analyzed from the input by Indian executives is that Indian organizations during the COVID era have actually become more employee-oriented and more open compared with the international benchmark. Now, you might ask, why is this? Well, one reason might be because Indian companies have an extreme big pressure on talented workforce. It is, in effect, an employee market. Employees get to choose where they go. So perhaps it was a coping mechanism from Indian organizations to showcase that actually we take care of our people. Another thing that came out is that compared with the international benchmark, if we look into the future, one point of attention specifically for the Indian market is that organizations might benefit more from becoming less control-oriented and more learning-oriented. So that also towards the future, workplaces are known not just for being employee-oriented and being open, but also for organizations that put a lot of self-control on people's own shoulders, self-responsibility, and are not afraid to enable people to keep on learning. Because you have, in the end, obviously two choices. People learn with you, or then they learn against you if they move to a competing organization. Now, what you see in front of you is basically the model we use for describing organizational reality. Different points of attention that, depending on strategic context and direction, can have one or multiple consequences. And this was the impact of COVID. Will this last? That remains, of course, to be seen. But this is one way of making the topic of organizational culture much, much more tangible. Why is this knowledge important? Because in order for us as corporate people, as organizational leaders, as facilitators, if we want to stay relevant towards the future and we want to outperform the market, we need to be on that right side of the Gauss curve that you see in front of you. It is not enough to be diverse. It is not enough to be inclusive. You need these both, and you need to be able to actively, basically, and proactively lead this diversity and manage this inclusion in order to be outperforming monocultural teams. And this is basically the one thing that I want to give you moving forward. Always remember that culture will impact your business, no matter what you say or no matter what you do. So it's better to lead than to be led, to use other than to have to deal with the consequences. And this is the service that we at Hofstede Insights provide, the ability to proactively leverage cultural diversity and to proactively align emotions, practices, and strategy. Why? Because different cultures have programmed us to think and act differently. Doesn't mean better or worse, it just means different. The only challenge is that if we forget these differences, if we try to ignore the differences, if we're afraid to name differences, then basically we are just basically creating more stress. And this is that one point. In order to have an organization that functions across cultures in line with the strategy, we need to highlight the differences in order to find the commonalities and in order to make our working practices explicit. And that's the magic. Once you're able to do that, things will move so much faster. And that basically brings us back to the quote that Akhilesh started today with. The survival of mankind will depend to a large extent on the ability of people who think differently to act together. Thank you. Back to Divya.
Thanks, Egbert. We at Hofstede Insights provide you with the vocabulary to make these differences explicit. Up next, we have a client of Hofstede Insights speaking about how cultural insights have helped develop leaders in her company. Laura-Maija Järvenpää is a senior manager in compensation and benefits with Huhtamäki, a Finland-based innovative food packaging products company that helps billions of consumers around the world make responsible choices every day. Laura-Maija, over to you.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me well. And first of all, thank you for having me in this great event. It's an honor to be here. And yes, we are the customer for Hofstede, and let's say we are a happy customer. So if we start from the quick company presentation, so that you will know kind of the setup where we are coming from in Huhtamäki. So if we move to the next slide. So like I said, we are a packaging company. We have different kind of products, and it is if we kind of try to make it a short snapshot. So we produce packages for food on the go and then food on the shelf. So different kind of purposes of food packaging. We do have also personal care, healthcare, that kind of packaging, but food is of course then the main kind of product category for us. Huhtamäki is then divided into different kind of segments based on the technology, which means in our setup that all the segments are then global. So we don't have that kind of local deliveries for in any of the categories. So if we go quickly to the next slide again. Okay, so this is the company setup. So basically, we have a footprint in many different countries. I think that I'm quite right if I say that Huhtamäki is at least one of the most global companies in Finland. So based on the map, you can see that we are present in all the continents and many of the sites. And as we are now kind of talking about India, so India is big for Huhtamäki. It's one of the countries where we have a huge amount of employees, almost close to 4,000 employees are then India employees. Of course, the culture means everything to us. It is kind of the, let's say, it's a basis whatever we do. Historically, Huhtamäki has been growing based on, of course, organic growth, but also through acquisitions. So meaning that in our company, we have multiple countries, meaning we have multiple cultures, we have multiple company cultures here and there. So kind of it has not been too easy to say that what is then the Huhtamäki culture. And then thinking about the situation now, what is our Huhtamäki culture post-COVID? How will that impact on the different cultures that we have and overall Huhtamäki culture? But if I kind of try to go into more to the concrete part of my speech, is then how kind of we have been using Hofstede for helping us on kind of understanding the cultures and dealing with the very much global setup that we have in the company. So of course, as you see from the map, we are present pretty much everywhere in the world. So for us, it is, like mentioned, the basic need to understand the cultures. Mr. Pramanik just mentioned in his speech that culture is the DNA of organization. I really like that, and I actually wrote that down. I'm going to use that later. So this is how it is really. It is just so crucial to understand other cultures. It is also very important for us to understand our own culture and then understand that what is then your individual and then kind of your cultural behaviors and using those in a global setup. What is the impact of your own behavior in your own culture and then with other cultures? We have been now using the cultural compass of Hofstede. Quite many employees already have been using that, and let's say the feedback is always positive. There are two main themes which are then always repeated in the feedback. The other one is Egbert, you already mentioned in your slide that it is kind of making emotions and practices tangible. So that's it. It has been always eye-opening experience to do the cultural compass. So many people are always mentioning that, oh, I wish I would have known that. I wish I would have understood these cultures differently. So now it makes sense that why did some of the things that I tried, they never worked. And I wish I would have known that before, so I could have been like more successful and somehow been able to facilitate my projects more properly. And then it's like really an eye-opening experience for all, basically, including myself. So I did the same cultural compass before I moved to United Arab Emirates around a year ago. And really, I can say that it helped me a lot to understand that where I'm coming from and then kind of the culture where I'm going to. So really, it is kind of, there are different kind of ways to handle and read about and learn about the cultures, but this is very concrete. It's about yourself, understanding yourself and understanding your behavior. And the other feedback which we always get from the people who are participating in the Culture Compass is that the facilitation has been remarkable. So kind of there is a good report coming from the Cultural Compass already, but then the facilitation session where there's a possibility to really kind of go through the report and get more insights about it and then the culture in general. So it's like a really highly appreciated. So currently Huhtamäki, we are kind of in the change. We have a new strategy, which we are now all the time implementing more and more. So of course that has been impacting on the leadership. It has been impacting on we have new values. So all of those are then kind of making an umbrella of everything. So now we are then renewing many of the processes and this and that. And the plan is that we are kind of now planning to include this kind of training, the Hofstede one, to our global mobility framework. So again, if you look at the map, you can understand that we have quite a lot of amount of needs to get the mobility, the global mobility in place even more and more. So this kind of training is definitely something that we absolutely need whenever there is any kind of that kind of assignments happening. And then also from that perspective that many of the projects that we have in the company, but people in those projects are from different places. All those processes and all of those projects, they are global ones. So to be able to be successful, again, understanding cultures is a basic need for success. So we have plans also to use more and more this when it comes to the leadership development, because again, if you don't understand the differences of the cultures, you can't really be a successful leader, I believe.
Thank you very much, Laura-Maja, for sharing your experience with the Hofstede Insights tools.
Thank you.
Riina Tsiagi is our next speaker, and she is the Chief Human Resource Officer for Manipal Signa Health Insurance Company Limited. She has been a part of the core team, which has led the organization through some critical transitions and change, leading to its reputation of a great place to work. A human resource professional with over 25 years of experience, she has been in HR leadership roles with organizations like ABN AMRO, Bharti Airtel, and now Manipal Signa. Riina, welcome.
Thank you so much, Divya. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are, Riina. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So thank you so much for inviting me. It is indeed a great pleasure to be here on this forum. Not just that I get a chance to share my experiences and my thoughts on culture, but also got to hear some lovely thoughts from all the speakers here, including Akhilesh, Bhaskar, Egbert, and Lauren. So great insights coming out of this discussion. When Akhilesh invited me to speak on this forum, it was indeed exciting because we've had some exciting partnerships in one of the earlier engagements that we did, and where we actually used the Hofstede model. And I will speak about it a bit later. It was actually I come from a health insurance company. It is called Manipal Cigna. And we were JV, which was called Cigna TTK earlier. We had a new partner coming in. So the TTK moving out and Manipal coming in. So even though it was not a merger and acquisition type of plan, but then you have a new partner coming in, that calls for a lot of change and transformation. The JV was in a completely different field. It was in the field of financial services. Manipal as a partner got a lot of strength in terms of understanding Indian markets, distribution strength, healthcare knowledge, and at the same time we had Cigna, which was a US-based insurance company. So we had a new partner coming in. There was a lot of opportunity to work on culture because have to adapt a culture of a new merger or a acquiring company, but a new partner and so on. So we'll see about it later. But I'm also glad that with Hofstede coming in, and I think some of the speakers touched upon it, our experience working with Hofstede was that a very multi-dimensional and multi-focused model is what we got to see during our engagement last year. Also very data-driven. As Bhaskar spoke about, that when we talk of culture, we talk about the field, we talk about the software aspects, but how do you make it tangible and how do you make it? So I think that was one of the critical things that we really thought Hofstede brought into table, and we got a lot of data, which made us think. And I still remember one of the workshops that we were doing, people thought it was going to be a culture workshop, and suddenly we were talking numbers, and we were talking about this is the score that you're at, and what do you want to do to be at a score which is higher than this, and which really brought out a lot of interesting discussions and insights. So that's something really. So very glad that Hofstede is going to be in India. Pleasure. A lot of opportunity in Indian markets. Egbert spoke about it, and I had it in my notes too. That we are in a VUCA world, and we spoke about volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, which has got kind of accentuated because of the pandemic. And suddenly the change and volatility which was already there has become so fast. Things are changing. How the companies look, feel, behave, how the consumers are behaving has changed, right? So the companies are going back to the drawing board in terms of their strategy, possibly also looking at the way their products have to be redesigned, not just go-to-market strategy. So in all that, I think it becomes very, very relevant to look at culture and go back to the drawing board and really see if really culture needs a tectonic shift or really needs some slight tweaking in, slight shifts, or we're already there. So this really becomes very, very relevant in today's time. The strengths that Hofstede can bring in. So a lot of opportunity there. We all know talent and culture is the biggest differentiator in such a dynamic and changing market like India. The world is changing, but I think Indian markets are so dynamic. You have to be here to be able to see it, that how dynamic, how fast changing they are. And organizations truly, there is a acceptance that talent and culture can be the biggest differentiator, because it really defines how your people not just interact with themselves, but also with the external world. And one of the key things I think which comes to my mind is that if you are there looking at culture as one of the levers, not one of the levers, the key thing, and we all talk about the cliched thing about culture can eat strategy for breakfast. So really, if you have to meet your business objectives, culture has to be defined very clearly. It cannot be about simple, soft touch and feel. That I want people to be nice, I want them to collaborate, but what it is, because culture is an amalgamation of behaviors which has to be supported by right processes and structures. A great definition of culture is not supported by process, and culture can actually help us. So I think that's where Hofstede really comes in and becomes very, very relevant. For us at Manipal Signa, we've actually, culture is one of the key pillars for us as far as our employee value proposition is concerned. And we do have a clear understanding, thanks to Hofstede, on what do we really look at from our culture, right? And what are the gaps. Just to give you kind of an insight on the kind of work that we did with Hofstede a couple of years back when Manipal came in, means obviously as a new organization, when the Manipal and Signa came together, we said that our mission was to give peace of mind to the communities that we serve, right? And when the two giants really came together, it was very, very important for us to understand that what was the optimal culture for us. So what was our mission? What was the strategy that we were looking at? And what was the optimal culture? And in this definition of optimal culture, we actually had, as I said, a very scientific way of approaching it, which kind of got a lot of buy-in from people who were the stakeholders who were involved, right? Because people understand numbers, right? So there was a lot of work around that. Once we had an optimal culture defined, we actually did an executive culture matching, wherein we matched the kind of behaviors that we, the leadership team of the JV and Manipal, were demonstrating. Even though, as I said, it was not necessary that the two teams had to behave in a similar manner, because they came from different external ecosystems, different markets, the challenges were different. But it was very, very important. There were two sides as far as stakeholders are concerned. So it is very important for each side to be aware of that how do the sides behave and why do they behave like that, right? So that was there. But having said that, we also identified certain shifts that we wanted to make as far as the culture was concerned, with a detailed program around it. And based on the gaps that we found out, we actually we defined a competency framework. We looked at assessing our key talent around those competency framework. And I must say it was an amazing partnership, thanks to Akhilesh, who was really a great partner to us in this entire journey of almost a year and a half, which we started by sitting with the stakeholders and Akhilesh and the team to really define the mission and what we wanted to do. So it was an exciting journey. Really looking forward to Hofstede here being here in India. And as I said, a lot of opportunity here, a lot of opportunity to give culture a very tangible, picture. And there's a lot of opportunity to look around there. So I'm so glad that Indian markets still get exposed to something like that. So congratulations to you all and all the best for the venture.
Thank you so much, Reena. Thank you very much for your experience with Hofstede Insights. We're reaching the top of the hour. So first of all, I would like to thank all of our guest speakers for being here today. Mr. Pramanik, Lara Maya, Reena, thank you so much for all your insights. Thank you also to everybody who's joined in from across the world. It's a pleasure to see you all and have you share this exciting experience for us as we enter India. We have time for one of the questions that we've received in private. There is a question about mergers and acquisitions and how Hofstede Insights supports mergers and acquisitions from the cultural point of view, which, of course, Reena, you have touched upon quite well with your own experience at Manipal Signa. We do have another question, which is quite relevant in these times, I think. How do you see the importance of culture now with the corona crisis changing how companies work? I would like to bring Egbert to answer this question, please.
Thanks, Didier. I think one statement once made by Hofstede, actually the title of his book is very opportune. It's Cultures and Organizations, Software of the Mind. When we're dealing with COVID and there's all this talk about, okay, it's a reset. What kind of a reset? in the end, it's not technology. The technology was already there. We could already use Zoom. We could already use WebEx, MS Teams 2-3 years ago. But what has really changed, and personally, I hope that will continue, of course, I'm somewhat biased, is that we have reset how we have coded our mind. If we talk about pretty much anything that is touched upon by this FUCA movement, there's this saying, the only constant change is change itself. And that basically means that if we want to enable both ourselves as individuals, as personalities, or as leaders or as organizations, in order to deal with changes that come faster and more frequently, because there will be other COVIDs, whether it's a natural disaster or it's another disease, things will happen. That's one of the things that happens with globalizations. The only thing that can change is how do we codify our own adaptability. And in order to understand what that means, we need to make that very tangible on an individual level. How do you relate to new things? How do you relate to new cultures, to new people, to new ways of being led, to new ways of leading? And that is, I would say, the key insight that COVID has brought forward. It's not technology or digitalization that's new. That's been ongoing since the industrial age. The only thing that is changing is that it happens more frequently, and therefore what has to change is how we code our mind. Our own mind, the minds of our children, the minds of our people that work for us, the people that work with us. And that's why this making things tangible is so important, because we can't keep assuming that we're all the same. We're not, and that is the beauty of it. Together, we are very different in very many different things. Exploring those differences allows us to deal with whatever life has in store for us.
Thanks, Egbert. On that note, I think we couldn't end it on a better note. It is the top of the hour. I thank all of you for joining us today for this launch of Hofstede Insights India operations. We look forward to associating with you more as we continue with our development all over the world. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening, great rest of the day, wherever you're joining us from. Bye-bye.